Hey guys, on this episode of Beyond the Beard, we resume our historical figures discussions. We're going to jump in to discuss one of the greatest coaches of all time, as much as it pains me to say that, Vince Lombardi. So hang tight and we'll start the journey.
On this island, you'll not find love. Only sleepless nights. I'm just a ghost of the man I was. Too weary to fight.
Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Beard podcast, a podcast dedicated to discovering true masculinity. Thanks for joining us today. We have a fun episode. We're going to resume.
Yes, we do.
We're gonna jump back into history, or jump back into history.
That was so cheesy.
I
I
know.
loved it. That
Hey,
was
man.
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, thanks, Matt.
You're welcome.
Since we're already on this digression, how you doing, bud?
Very good.
Yeah?
Very good. Yeah, I got to took my son paintballing for the first time this
Nice.
weekend. He had a buddy who was doing his birthday party, got to go paintballing, so
Sweet.
that was awesome. He got hit a couple times, but just took it and liked it. He
Love
actually enjoyed it. Yeah, so
Cool.
yeah, it was a blast. It was really fun. We
That's
had a really
sweet.
good time. So that was cool. Little manly activity there, and seeing my son, get hit and being like, ow, then going back in and wanting more, that was pretty cool. So I liked that. Good weekend overall. Very busy, but good. So
Nice.
how are you?
Good. Good. I was traveling this week, so I was in Chicago. It was my first
Dude, you're
time.
traveling a lot, man.
Lately, yeah, it's picking up. So yeah, so it was my first time in the Windy City. Which I can attest, guys, it is actually windy there. So the rumors are true. No, it was good. Yeah, it's fun to see a different part of the U.S. Beautiful this time of year. The leaves are changed, and yeah,
Yep.
so that was fun.
Yep.
But kind of tired. Excited to be here though. This is kind of the highlight for my week. But Mike,
One of
how
my
you doing?
favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, how you doing, bud?
Where is Mike on this thing?
Where is Mike?
There,
Mike's right
there he
there.
is.
Is that an existential question? Where is Mike?
It always
It might
is.
be.
What is Mike?
Mike is tired is relevant or obvious by the fact that I don't know where my keys are. We messed up the intro, all the things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all good. So that's what editing's for.
That's right.
Thank
No one's
God.
even going to know it except for that you said it.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, Matt, why don't you kick us off, man?
Yeah. So today I've been looking forward to this one. What's cool is this is actually the last lesson I did with my boys at school, which is pretty cool. For those of you that don't know or haven't listened to the other ones, I do a lunch group with some 7th, 8th grade boys, and I say some, but it's somewhere usually in between 30 and 60. It's pretty big now, which is pretty awesome. Like that
Cool.
many boys want to come and just hang out with some teacher who wants to talk to them about being a man. I don't know. It's pretty cool. But we were talking about the idea of pursuing excellence. And so that's what I was hitting for, the idea that I had a lot of boys who, yeah, they're excellent on the football field, or they're excellent on the basketball court, but they're not excellent in the classroom, or they're not excellent in the hallways, so they're not excellent when they're in the stands,
Yeah.
And so we were talking about why it's important to be excellent in every aspect of our life. And that led us to the man we were going to be talking about tonight, which is, of course, the greatest coach of all time. And there's no debate. I mean, we named the trophy after him. You win the trophy. Vince Lombardi. And of course, many people should know who that is. If you don't, we're going to talk a little bit about him tonight. I'm going to start off just by giving a little history about him. We're going to hit his pre-coaching life a little bit. We'll talk about his accomplishments. And then I got 3 quotes I'm going to share with you guys. We're going to build our way up through them. And I'm going to do with you guys what I did with my boys.
Cool.
And just kind of run you guys through that. And we're going to discuss this idea of, again, we want to relate everything back to masculinity. And specifically to our touchstone. I don't want to call it a definition yet, because again, the entire idea of the show is that we're exploring the idea of masculinity. We don't have all the answers. Okay. If we did, I'd have a lot more money, because people would be paying me to give them answers. Right.
Tell them what's what. Yeah.
And so, we want to go with this little touchstone that we have, which is strength wielded with control in service to God and in defense of the true, beautiful, and the good. We're going to spend some episodes breaking down each of those terms, but tonight I think we're actually going to get a chance to break a couple of those down. But we're going to relate back what we see from Vince Lombardi to that kind of touchstone for what we think masculinity is. And I'm going to be asking you guys some questions. I'm going to want to hear what you guys think as well.
Cool.
And we'll just kind of see what we can take from this man's life to apply to our own to try to help us become better men, which I think is pretty cool, because I think this will really tie into one of our previous interviews where we got to interview Coach Swantek.
Huh.
which would be my dad.
I was gonna say, is there a relation there?
But just a little bit, yeah. So if you haven't seen that episode, we'll definitely put a link in the description of this one because I think you're going to start to see that a lot of what we talk about really ties into each other.
Mhm.
And the men that we're meeting with and discussing, you're going to start seeing a lot of what they have to say really ties into what we're discussing in our own episodes. So with that said, Vince Lombardi. What do you guys know about him, by the way? Let's start with that. Prior knowledge. What you got, Tim?
Well, I know he won the first Super Bowl.
He did win the first Super Bowl and the second.
He coached the Packers for a very long time.
Packers for a while, yeah.
No, I really don't know a ton of details about him other than I just know he was a great coach.
And they named the trophy after him.
And they know, exactly. Like, I mean, you got to be pretty good if they name the trophy after you.
If they name the trophy you win, you got to be pretty good.
Or pretty bad, I suppose.
Well, if it was like the worst player
exactly.
award,
the
Razzies, right? Of football.
The trophies aren't just for winners, man.
Mike, what do you know about Vince Lombardi? Anything?
He does something with sports ball.
Stop pretending like you don't know what sports are. You don't watch a lot of football, though, do you?
I don't like football.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Are you sure you're an American? I
I'm
think
very
that's a
American.
requirement.
I prefer. I'll watch rugby. It moves faster.
You know, I'll give that to you.
And they don't wear pads.
Dude, yeah, but they tackle different, too, because you can't hit below, like, the waist, right?
They
In
also
rugby?
don't get as much CTE as.
Well, yeah, this because you're not going, or is it you can't hit a, what is it in rugby?
I don't actually know.
It's, I'm pretty sure it's you can't hit below the waist. I had a buddy who I roomed with in college and he played rugby, do that, and he was tough. But man, like, he came back one time, had his whole face like smashed in, had to get it like restart. Yeah, rugby is tough. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll let you have rugby. I'm fine with that. Rugby's pretty awesome.
I always joke that like there's two people you don't ever want to fight, and that's somebody in special forces and someone who plays rugby
or hockey.
Hockey,
Dude,
but
those
here's
guys,
the thing. Here's the thing. They wear pads.
They take them off when they fight. They just smack each other in the face. They take the helmet off.
I'm just telling you. Hockey. I give you. You guys are tough. But rugby, those dudes are just crazy. Like there's a level of craziness.
The thing is, though, in hockey, you're moving faster.
True.
But you're moving. I mean, you have
pads, and it's not
but
like
that's
it's
what
not
makes
like
you
the movies where
but
people
the
are just
pads
crushed.
The pads allow you to hit harder.
I don't
That's the
disagree.
idea. It like
I don't disagree.
Yeah. So, but anyways, yeah.
We
So Mike
digress.
knows nothing. Tim knows a little. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Vince Lombardi, born June 11th, 1913. Yeah, quite a while ago. And he is the son of not Irish, Italian immigrants, son of Italian immigrants, growing up in Brooklyn, New York. Grew up in kind of like middle class area, lower class. And his family was always attending Catholic church. So he grew up Catholic, staunch Catholic. And so we'll tie that into our definition later on. But yeah, he actually, when he was growing up, was trying to be a priest initially. And then didn't like that, ended up going to high school and ended up joining the football team, became a fullback and played football. Was pretty good, went to college for it and played on, I think it was Fordham University, I believe it is.
Okay.
And he played fullback there. And he was part of a group called like the 7 Blocks of Granite. So it was like the 5 offensive linemen, a tight end, and then him.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were just like impossible to move, right? Like he was pretty undersized for his position, but he was good at what he did and tried to play a little pro ball. Didn't go very far in that.
Okay.
And that's when he kind of started going into like real life. He became a debt collector for a little bit, and he went to law school for a little bit, and then ended up getting a coaching job at a high school and coached football there for a little bit, and then went back to Fordham where he was an assistant. Okay. And I guess he coached at Army in there too somewhere. And I'll have to look at that again. But he actually becomes the head coach for West Point. And that's when he really gets kind of onto the scene. So he's head coach at West Point, and then gets brought into the NFL, becomes a defense coordinator for a group called the New York Giants. And is their defensive coordinator for a little bit. And then finally, in the year 1959, he joins the greatest franchise ever. That is not opinion.
Gross.
Not an opinion.
No,
hey, you know what? It's okay. Not everybody can have good opinions. Not everybody can cheer for good teams.
It's okay. Some people are indoctrinated.
Some
That's
people,
all right.
listen, not everyone can go to heaven. That's why Vikings fans were invented. Okay?
Wow.
I'm just throwing that out there. Vikings fans. I'm kidding, sort of, maybe.
They go to Valhalla, okay?
That's okay. You know what? Stupid Vikings. I hate the Vikings because they're good.
They are good this year.
They're good. Like at least, even when they're not good, they still challenge the Packers. Like the Lions, I hate the Lions, but they've been crappy for so long. You're kind of like, kind of rooting for them to be decent because you just like feel for their fans. The Bears, it's like a great rival. Vikings, there's nothing redeemable. Nothing.
Okay, so
But anyways,
okay, so Lombardi. So hold on a
Lombardi
second.
joins. Yeah.
Real quick question. So his coaching journey to this point covers like what years to what years?
So that was 1940. I think it was like 1940 through 1959 is when he joins the Packers.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a pretty long journey.
Yep.
But yeah, high school, then to college, then to, and he's assistant. Then he becomes head coach at West Point. Then becomes D coordinator at New York Giants, and then joins the Green Bay Packers in 1959, which coaches them from 59 to 67.
Okay.
So only 8 years actually.
Dang.
Like when you think about it, a lot of people think, oh, he must have been there for a long time. No, just about 8 years.
Okay.
And this is where we really get into his accomplishments as a coach.
Okay.
Obviously, 2-time Super Bowl champion, won the first 2 Super Bowls, 5-time NFL champion. So that's before 3 of them before we called it the Super Bowl.
Right. That's before the merger, right?
Yep.
Okay.
He ends up being part of the NFL 100-year anniversary team. 2-time Coach of the Year, Green Bay Hall of Fame. He's in the Redskins Hall of Fame because after he coaches Green Bay Packers, he goes to the Redskins for 1 year and becomes head coach and then president. Never once had a losing record. Never once.
Pretty
Isn't
good.
that wild?
Yeah.
96, 34, and 6 was
Even
his
in
final.
college?
I believe so. His overall, that might have only been pros. I'll have to double check college, but I know in the pros he never had a losing record.
That's still impressive.
in a year.
Curious.
Yeah, and then 73% win percentage, won 73% of his games,
Dang.
9-1 in the playoffs. 9-1 in the playoffs. Yeah. So I mean, when it comes to coaching, first of all, you hear those numbers. Any initial thoughts? Mike's got nothing. He's like, I got no thoughts on that.
I think, and I think you have 2 groups of people. You have people who really care about sports and really like sports, and then you have people who don't really care that much about them.
I think you have a third group that don't even know what they are, and they're just like, what?
I kind of lump them
with the don't
yeah.
care.
They fall into that group anyway. I think the statistical like percentages are what stick out to me.
Oh yeah,
right, because now if you look at modern numbers, right, you say 9-1 the playoffs, that doesn't sound that impressive. But I mean 90% win rate in the postseason, and then 73%. I mean that shows a continued level of excellence for a sustained period of success, right?
Yep.
I think you can have guys who have a fluky one good season, happen to put together a good staff or have some good players. I do think when you're talking about a period of success like this, it does speak to you as a leader because you lose players, you lose coaches, and so you're constantly having to put people in positions to succeed. And so, I mean, those are my initial thoughts. I mean, it is impressive to be able to go and do that. And again, thinking about this era, right? It's not like it is today, right? I mean, the game was incredibly more violent. The athletes were not like today's athletes. I mean, you don't have dudes who were 6'5", 260 pounds and can run a 4.6 40, right?
Yep.
A 4.6 40. So like a different group of athletes, but yet still able to have the levels of success. I mean, again, I think it's impressive.
Well, that's I like that you brought up the different athletes because it was also a very different game because I believe back then the ball wasn't blown dead until like the forward progress had stopped. I believe at that point still.
Dude. Yeah.
So you had guys like Jimmy Taylor, who, if you guys don't know who Jimmy Taylor is, go look up some of the videos of people talking about him. He was a fullback for the Packers, led the league in rushing many times. Or no, he was second because there was a guy named Jim Brown who'd always beat him out. But he was like, I mean, if you had to pick a guy to get 1 yard for you, it would be Jimmy Taylor. He was, so one of the stories was like, there was a guy named Sam Huff who they did not like each other. Sam Huff was a Giants linebacker and really good player, but they hated each other because Jimmy Taylor, the quote was, there's no way to play dirty against Jimmy Taylor. It was just who plays the dirtiest.
Dang.
He bit a dude. They were down to pile. And they're like, he didn't drop blood or anything, but yeah, he gave the guy a bite. He just grabbed some guy's leg, pulls it through his face mask, and gives him a bite. Like, I mean, that's what football was back then. That was when they had like one bar in front of their face, right? Yeah. And it was like, man, dude, like, Oh my gosh, can you imagine those hits, especially like Lambeau
No.
Field in the cold in the
Yep.
winter, right?
Yep.
Like, oh man, just like, but yeah, you're right. It's a very different time, and so winning those games was different, and there was fewer teams and
Yep.
fewer games, and so at the same time though, to have those winning percentages and to win 5 championships,
Yep.
right? Like that's pretty darn good.
Yep.
That's pretty darn good. So after he's done coaching football, I didn't really look into too much after that because I was trying to focus on the coaching aspect. I was
Sure.
trying to focus on that. He does end up, this is very sad, but at the same time, it's probably the most man thing I've ever heard. He was having a lot of stomach issues, like digestive issues. And his doctor kept saying, you got to go in and get your colon checked. You got to, and he kept saying, nah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Eventually in 1970, he's sent to the hospital, having a bunch of issues. Turns out he has colon cancer, just horrible. And he ends up passing away September 3rd, 1970 at 57 years old, passes away. And it was like the most, like, I don't know. I just saw that and I was like, that is such a man thing. Cause that's me. I hate going into the doctor. I don't want to go in. Like,
Sure.
I'll feel better eventually, maybe. Right?
I
Right?
mean, so
my wife gets so mad.
I want to push back on that so hard,
You
but
go
that's
right
not
ahead.
that. Well, that's not what this episode's about.
I'm not saying we should.
Right.
That was not encouragement.
Right.
It was literally me just saying, like, I sympathize with that because I'm like, I don't want.
That's what a lot of guys do.
Yes,
is what
it's
you're
what
saying.
a lot of us do.
Yeah.
It's what a lot of us do. One of the last words that he said, he wasn't afraid of death. He had told his, he had his priest come in. He was
Okay.
talking to him, and he was like, "No, I'm not afraid to die." He said, "I just wish I could have accomplished more. Just wish I could have accomplished more." Like, think about that. You 5 championships, right? 5 championships.
Sure.
All these wins, right? And even at that time, he's hailed as a great coach, right?
Yeah.
And his words, at the end of his life is, "Man, I wish I could have accomplished more." Like that's just so interesting to me that I don't know. I think it goes both ways. That idea of, number one, what does that tell you about him when it comes to his accomplishments?
Well, he's never satisfied.
Yeah, he always wants more. He wants to be better, right? He wants to do more. And I think it's also, or it could show a side of, like, again, like, never satisfied in a good way or in a bad way.
Yeah.
Right? Like, always wanting to be better, or is it like it's just never enough? I think it was more the second one. I think it was more, or first one, I mean.
Yeah.
I think it was more the, like, I just want to keep doing more. Like, I always want to be better. But I think it's because I've studied him a bit and I've
Sure.
read books about him and all that. So, but yeah, kind of a very interesting life though, right? 57 years. It's not very old when you think about it, right?
Oh, he was 57.
Like, yeah, I thought it said he was 57. Can you double check that? Because for some reason, no, that had to be, it was a 67. I'm pretty sure I wrote down 67. I think I said 57. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Is it 1913 to 1970? No, that's 57. 57 years. Okay, good. My math is right. We're all good.
Yep.
All right. It was 57. Yeah. But he didn't look 57.
No, dude.
Yeah, he
Dude
looked
looked
a little
old.
older than that. But yeah, very like packed a lot of stuff into 57
I was just
years.
gonna say that is a lot in a short period of time. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I've seen pictures of him, and I figured he lived to like
I thought
80.
he was like 60 or 70 when he
I
died.
mean, yeah.
57. It was kind of interesting. I was like, did I write that
Interesting.
down wrong? I
Yeah.
was doubting myself there.
Okay.
But yeah, 57 years old, man.
Okay.
57 years old. And this is kind of like, I think the first question I would ask you guys before we even get into his quotes, because I think that's where we're really going to spend most of our time,
Okay.
is discussing what he said, because a lot of why he stands out is the inspiration he had for his players, right? How he inspired his players as a coach, right? Because as a
Okay.
coach, you're not going out there, right? But what you do as a coach is the training, right, and all
Yep.
that stuff. I think we know what coaches do, right, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And you can have talented players, but if you don't have a good coach, that talent probably isn't going to amount to anything. Like
Sure.
I love the Green Bay Packers, but we just lost to the Lions, and it's because the Lions are a disciplined team. Packers are immensely talented.
Yep.
But they lack discipline. Penalties, dropped footballs, bad snaps, stupid mistakes over and over and over
Yep.
again. And the Lions just consistently down the field make every single play they're
Yep.
supposed to make. And I think to me that showed a lot of coaching,
Sure.
right, for the Lions. But any thoughts so far about what you've heard? Mike, any thoughts? You've been kind of quiet over there.
No, I don't got any thoughts.
Mike is emphatically shaking his head no.
No.
Mike is tired today, which is weird because last time Mike was tired, Mike was talking a lot. I was kind of hoping that would happen again. That was fun. No filter Mike.
No filter mic is on a
Punchy
different-
Mike.
Although we were talking more about we got way off track though on that one,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. So I have a couple quotes for you guys.
Sure.
And this is where I think we really get into our conversation about this man is actually because there's so much in coaching when it comes to words.
Yep.
And I think you guys know that. The power of words is immense.
Sure.
I think that's kind of interesting when we talk about, and I'll get into this in a second, but just the power of words and what those hold and how we apply that to masculinity. But I want to start with this quote, and this is the quote I gave my boys when we started talking about this idea. And it's, gentlemen, we are going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well we will not catch it because nothing is perfect. But we are going to relentlessly chase it because in the process we will catch excellence. I'm not remotely interested in just being good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So first thoughts on that quote. Now I read it to you. Might be kind of hard to just process it. If you want me to read it again, let me know.
Sure.
But yeah, relentlessly chasing perfection, knowing full well we will not catch it.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I think a couple of things. One, I think that there is a level of humility that you have to go into that with because you have to understand, like, I'm never going to get there and I'm going to still pursue it. Right. Like,
Mhm.
because I think when you are a high performer, you expect a lot of yourself and those around you, but at some point you get to look back and go, look at what I've accomplished.
Mhm.
When you have this view, you really are looking continually towards the future and continually pursuing that. And so there isn't time to say, look at what I've done, you know, because you have this understanding of, I will not attain perfection. Now, I think that there is a point where you do have to take stock of what you've accomplished in order to have a level of fulfillment, right? Because without that, it does make that relentless pursuit, I would say not meaningless, but it starts to feel empty. Right.
Okay.
Right. There's an emptiness in there because you're just constantly.
Yeah.
Nobody has an endless gas tank, right? Like nobody can just keep going without having some sort of motivation pushing you forward.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
and maybe what I just said didn't make a ton of sense, but
No,
I think,
I get it. Like, again,
there's-
that idea of chasing perfection, right?
Yep.
But sometimes we can get caught up in trying to be perfect,
Yep.
rather than recognizing, no, I'm aiming for perfection because and this is what I told my boys is, I always picture our lives and what we're aiming for as like an
Sure.
archery target, right?
Yep.
And so when you aim at an archery target, where do you aim?
It's the dead center
Is that where you aim?
at an archery target.
When you're aiming a bow, do you aim directly at the center?
I'm not an archer.
Well,
I mean,
arrows
I guess,
are affected
I
by
guess,
what?
I guess. Okay. So if you're
Wouldn't that be
adjusting for
aiming?
wind, you're.
Well, I was thinking gravity. Arrows are always going to get pulled down a little bit, right? They're never
it
going to fly
depends on
per-
yes.
obviously distance, but
Yeah,
usually you're going to try to aim a little bit above your target. Why?
I got you. Yep.
Because you want to hit that center, but you got to aim slightly above it. And that idea of, again, pursuing perfection, knowing full well I'm not going to reach it, but on the way, yeah, like reality is going to pull me down. Reality is
Sure.
going to reveal it to you, but on the way I'm going to hit that center, which is my true goal.
Sure.
Excellence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think trying to get that idea across, that the perfection cannot truly be obtained. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
we're not striving for
Yeah.
it. And on that note, we brought up our definition, right? Strength wielded with control and service to God and in defense of the true, beautiful, and good. For our definition of masculinity, that's our ideal goal,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Like that would be our ideal man. And Mike's about to say something. I think this is going to be really interesting. Oh, you weren't? I thought you were looking up the thing about archery.
I know like next to nothing about archery. I just know that the average firing distance for a bow and arrow, like of efficacy, is pretty short. So accounting in for gravitational pull is not very likely.
Well, I mean, like
But
in competition and stuff like
but
that, they're
I-
going to be.
I don't know what the ranges are.
But yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
didn't get that
you're
far.
definitely gonna have whatever. It's a great example. It's an analogy. You guys are taking
Yeah,
it way too seriously.
I didn't want to nitpick.
My
but that's where
boys didn't
brain
question.
goes.
They were like, "Oh, that's a great idea."
Well, your boys are also like 12.
Seventh graders. They're 13
I would
and
probably go
14.
more to like long range shooting with like a rifle.
You know what?
'cause
That's
then
fine
you
too. When
get
you're trying
very
to
offset,
snipe someone
Either-
at a
well,
significant
either
distance.
way.
Yeah, I'm
Thanks for getting us-
focusing on the wrong part. That's
Yeah,
why.
yeah.
Yeah, but the idea is again, when we want to hit excellence, we have to aim for perfection, right? Because if we
Yep.
aim for excellence, most of the time, what are we going to do?
Yeah, we'll
Get
hit-
slightly below
yeah,
that.
yep.
And that's kind of the idea. But I do like this idea of having this ideal vision of masculinity
Yeah.
that I'm sorry, none of us are ever going to be able to obtain that truly. We're always going to make mistakes,
Sure.
right? As men, we're always going to mess up. And in fact, I've noticed so many times like I'll start getting better in one area and then I'll start slacking in another, or
Yeah.
I'll improve, but then I'll start noticing everywhere else that I'm deficient.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing this podcast has taught me is just how many other areas I'm deficient in.
Yeah.
And I love that quote though, that idea of I'm not interested in being just good.
Yeah.
Because again, if I'm aiming for just good and I settle, like, am I not depriving myself and others?
Yeah. Well, I think the default there is what you're aiming at, right? Right. So having the correct vision, having the correct goal to begin with is really what is going to get you to be successful, get you to be where you want to be, right? And so
Yeah.
to your point, that's why we have to aim, or we should be aiming for what our ideal man, like who, if you were to picture the best version of yourself, the most perfect version of yourself, like what would that be?
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
you pursue that. And I think because each of us is going to be slightly different, right? And I think it should be pointed out that what that looks like for each person, you're going to have to kind of figure that out for yourself, right? Like there's an individuality. I think based on our touchstone here, right? You have these definitions, but how that is played out in your life looks a little different, like your life versus mine. Now, that doesn't mean like virtue is different or truth or beauty.
Oh yeah.
right?
No,
But,
I get it.
But who your ideal, like you and I at our peak performance, perfect, whatever,
We're still going to look different.
we're going to look different.
Yep.
Right. And I think that I don't want it to be lost on guys that it's not going to be uniform across the board. This idea of who the perfect version of you is needs to be like, I guess, framed on who you are and what your gifts and talents are. Now, we look at guys like Vince Lombardi, or, we've talked about Aragorn, or some other guys, and those give us, components that we can go,
Yes.
this, right? Like, this is what resonates with me. This is who I could be.
Yeah.
This is, because if you look at stories, there's so many different characters that people connect with. And I think that is in part because of who they are as an individual.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, sorry, I kind of
No,
ran around
I-
in a circle there.
I
But
like that you brought that up because again, it brings us back to coaching. What Lombardi, what any good coach understands is
Yeah.
you have to build your plan around the players you have.
Yep.
And I think that's interesting you brought that up because I was thinking about that, how my dad, I think all three of us agree, he was a pretty darn good coach. I think most people would. I mean, he won Coach of the Year from Gazette Preps for
Sure.
Colorado 2019 to 2020.
Yep.
And the thing I loved so much about my dad was he would take his players and build a plan around who he had.
Sure.
There's a lot of coaches that build a system and say, fit into my system or you're not part of the team.
Yeah.
My dad was different. He'd say, I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to learn your strengths and I'm going to build this entire team around our strengths. And that's why even when we weren't really great players, we could come together as a team
Sure.
and play well,
Sure.
and I remember that in our JV games, like, when we were kids and we wouldn't be the best team, but we could still hold our own against teams that were significantly
Yeah.
better than
Yeah.
us because my dad built that plan around us.
Sure.
And I like what you said though, that idea of, again, we look at this idea of strength. I'm sorry, we broke down strength into three different aspects: spiritual,
Yep.
physical, and mental strength.
Yep.
And it's like I've seen men with physical strength who totally lacked spiritual strength. And even a lot of the mental side of it.
Yep.
Like where things go bad and they fall to pieces. You see that in athletes a lot. Did you ever notice that? Like there's athletes that have the physical strength, right? And the endurance and all that stuff, but they lack that mental fortitude. When things start going bad, they fall to pieces. I've seen so many kids like that too, but even great athletes need that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think of like, the guy that goes to work every day, takes care of his family, works his butt off, works in a cubicle,
Sure.
comes home, spends time with his kids, helps his wife. Is that not masculine? Is he not a masculine man?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and you can point to there does take strength in there, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And that's I think that's what I
Perseverance, things like that.
but it is the strength is going to look different. And I'm sorry, you and I I've been working out, but I'm sorry, dude, like you work out in a totally different way than I do.
Yep.
And even if we both did the same exercises, we'd still turn out different.
And even from like a biological perspective, like
Yep.
you can have two individuals doing the same workout, the same
Yep.
eating the same diet, and they're going to look different because their biology
Yes.
is different, right?
Yep.
Their bodies respond to different stimuli differently, and so
And so I think that idea of pursuing excellence, I think I like the fact that you said, look, you also have to be realistic with yourself, right? I'm sorry, I'm never going to be Brock Lesnar, right? Like, I mean,
No.
Brock Lesnar's a
probably a
freak,
good thing.
right? Like, well, I meant like physically is what I was referring to. Nothing else there. But like, I mean, the guy is literally like a freak.
yeah,
And I think about that. I'm like, it doesn't matter how much I work out. I'm never going to be a 6'5"
Yeah.
human monstrosity that guy is.
yeah.
My gosh, I still can't believe. Did you ever see that? This is totally off topic. Did you ever see when he did the shooting star press and landed right on his head? And like, had it been any other human being, they would have just snapped their neck. But his neck muscles are so massive. All he got was like a concussion. Like, you should see it. If you ever get a chance, go look up Brock Lesnar's shooting star press. Just a wild scene. But yeah, that was our first quote. This idea of relentlessly pursuing perfection in order to reach excellence.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is perfection the right goal?
I think again, the idea is that is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But really, what is your goal?
Sure.
Excellence.
Sure.
Like, but it's that mental game you play with yourself. Like, think about when you're working out and you're trying to reach a certain goal.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost a lot of mind games, right? Pushing yourself, aiming higher, right, and then increasing that aim each time you reach it.
Yep.
And I think that's what he's talking about, right?
Sure.
He says we are going to relentlessly pursue perfection, knowing full well we will never reach it.
Yeah.
Because again, nothing's perfect, and he gets that. He's not asking you to be perfect; he's asking you to be excellent. So, what is excellence? How do we define it?
Ooh. How do we define excellence?
How do you define excellence? What is it?
Hmm.
How about what is it not? Let's start with that. That might be a little bit easier. What is not excellence?
Well, it's not the average.
Okay, so above average.
It would have to be above
Okay,
average.
Awesome. Yep.
Gosh, what is I mean, excellence? When I think of excellence, I guess I think of top 1% of performers.
Okay.
So in whatever is being done, you would fall into the category of top 1%, 1 to 2%.
Okay.
That's I guess for me the easiest way to kind of
Yeah.
conceptualize, because there's so many different things that you could be excellent in, right? I don't know. How would you define it?
So I'm going to bring up a second thing here just to tell you again what it's not, because I want to establish what it is. And I like that you said it's not average. It's above that. It is peak performance, right?
Yep.
But again, something that excellence is not. We at the school I teach at, our mission statement is our school exists to assist parents in their mission to develop exemplary citizens.
Yep.
Now we get that a lot where some people say, well, that's unfair to try to make kids perfect.
Sure.
Is exemplary perfect?
No.
Is excellent perfect?
No.
So we know that excellence is not perfect, but it's also not average. So it's that area between them.
Sure.
But there's good, there's great, and then there's excellent.
Excellent. Yeah.
Right? Like, and I like the fact that you said it's like that top 1%, that idea of you are the peak performer, right?
Yep.
And so I always say something that is excellent is the thing that you look to and try to emulate.
Mm.
And that would be, I think, a decent definition of what is excellence. It's getting to the point in something where people look and come to you
Sure.
in order to see what they need to be
Sure.
in that regard, whatever it is, a skill. Mike, do you have any thoughts on that? Was that actually a decent answer? Too confusing for you? I don't know. Maybe I didn't do that well enough.
I wouldn't say it's confusing for me now.
Dude, you have like nothing to say tonight. This is I'm just gonna keep asking Mike
He's
questions.
adamantly not participating. He's like, nope, I'm not gonna say.
Dude, you must
I'm
be
not gonna do
really
it.
tired tonight, or just like that borderline before really tired.
Something like that.
Something like
yeah.
that. Okay.
no.
Okay. But yeah. So excellence again, this idea of peak performance, it's that level that when you want to be that thing or be good at whatever that is, you look to that person, you emulate them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think of or you emulate that technique, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Does that sound fair? I would love to hear what people think in the comments, by the way, if you see this and you're like, hey, I think excellency is this, or here's the Merriam-Webster definition,
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
But again, our goal is to try to, like, we're three dudes just trying to have a discussion. And so I
Yeah.
kind of like the layman terms at times and just kind of like going into, are you looking up the definition? Thank you very much, sir.
Before we leave excellence, I guess I asked the question, like, is perfection the right goal? Because I think you also, if you're not careful, that becomes your, for lack of a better term, idol.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Because I think you have people who they are obsessed with being perfect. They are
I can think of one guy who comes to mind, Tom Brady.
Sure. And I mean, he's incredibly successful, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know the guy, and I don't claim to have any insights, but I mean, it does seem that part of that relentless pursuit also drove a wedge in his marriage, right? Like, and that's all. Again, guys, like that's I don't know him. That's just stuff I've read, speculation by other people, right? But all that being said, and he is not the only person, right? Like, this happens, especially for guys, and when it comes to work, right? That becomes an area where perfection can really take over everything else. And so I think it is important to kind of point out, if your pursuit of perfection overtakes everything else in your life, right? If you're not pursuing perfection for the right reasons, then it becomes its own end, and that I don't think is good.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's an ego-driven, self-satisfying end, and it's selfish. And so I think before we get too far down the road, and before people, like, this is a great, especially when you're talking about sports, right? Because there is so much that goes into the daily grind. Drills, taking care of your body, being mentally right, being, taking care of injuries, being prepared in the classroom. All of those things go into this idea of pursuing perfection. But if the goal is just to be like the best athlete or the best wide receiver ever, or I just picked wide receiver.
I get it.
Right? That doesn't necessarily make you a winner.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can have guys like Chad Ochocinco or Terrell Owens, who were amazing human specimens. I mean, just absolute monsters, amazing wide receivers. However, right, I think that there were other things that, inhibited them from having the possible success that they could. And so I think that when things become selfish, that's where you see them go wrong.
Yep.
Anyway.
And
those are my thoughts.
so you just busted out some Aristotle there, by the way, just to let you know, the golden mean.
Yep.
And we're going to be doing actually a study on Nicomachean ethics, just a brief excerpt of it on the idea of the golden mean and finding balance and things. But like you said, and this is why, again, we've brought this up multiple times, but this idea of toxic masculinity and how, like, we would make the argument it doesn't exist, because the things you would ascribe to toxic masculinity are actually either a lack of masculinity, or where you go too far, it ceases being masculine, right? And it becomes a jerk or abusive or horrible, right? It's bad, and again, if we say masculinity is in defense of the true, beautiful, and good, and you're doing things that are evil, ugly, and lies, obviously you're not being masculine by that definition. Now, again, that is our touchstone definition. So, but I like the fact that you brought that up, because there is that other side of it of where you relentlessly pursue perfection, thinking you can obtain it. Which I think is what that was. And you see it, but I mean, I can give you an example from my own life where I love teaching. I love teaching so much, and I put so much of myself into my lessons. And there was times there where, especially first 5, to 8 years of teaching, it created conflict in my marriage because I would go home and I had nothing left to give my wife and kids.
Yeah.
I would come home and I would veg out because I was done. I mean, I'm teaching 6 classes. I'm going at it all day.
Mhm.
Anyone who's been in my class knows I have a lot of energy, especially around kids. Like I love being around kids. They're amazing. And it's just so cool to sit there and talk with these little 7th graders. Cause number one, kids are pretty hardcore honest in junior
Yeah.
high. It's kind of funny. They don't like, there's times where they lie, but it's usually about silly things, but it's not like about who they are and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, or it's like they're just easy to talk to and they like hearing about goofy things like Star
Yeah.
Wars and the nerdy stuff, but I'd come home and I had nothing left to give my family. And
Yeah.
I was failing as a father and as a husband
Right.
because, I mean, my wife would be doing the dishes, cleaning up stuff like that, and I wouldn't even offer to help. I was tired. I did my job, right? And so trying to find that balance of saying, look, I need to pursue and be the best teacher I can be, pursue excellence.
Yep.
But I also need to pursue excellence in every aspect of my life.
Yep.
Because if you notice, when I'm pursuing perfection in teaching, all of a sudden I'm failing to even be remotely excellent in the rest of my life. And that leads us to my next quote.
Cool.
I think that was like the perfect transition point there. So here would be the second quote I want to give you guys. And this goes with I'll give you a question at the end of it. So winning is not a sometime thing. It's an all the time thing. You don't win once in a while. You don't do things right once in a while. You do them right all the time. Winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. So we think about that quote, right? Winning is not a sometime thing. It's an all the time thing. You don't do things right some of the time. You do them right all the time. So why is excellency important? Why is being excellent? Why is pursuing excellence important?
Well, I mean, I think in part because why is pursuing excellence?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just
No, you're good. Think about the quote I just gave you.
Yeah, no, I think that I guess excellence or perfection, right? I when I think about this, I think of mastery. That's how I conceptualize this. So when I think of pursuing mastery of something,
Ooh, I like that word.
right?
I like that.
It takes it's nobody gets it right on the first time. Nobody gets it right on the 100th time, right? It's that whole principle of 10,000 hours.
Mhm.
It takes a lot of repetition in order to develop any sort of habit, right? And so and you will not get to mastery, get to excellence without having those habits in place, right? Like all of those things build on each other. And so the end is propped up by all of the work that you've done to get there, right? And it's not over a short period of time. It's over a long period of time. And it's why those who you see are very successful have fairly regimented lives, right? Fairly regimented schedules. Tim Ferriss, the other Tim Ferriss, the famous Tim Ferriss, he has a podcast, and on it he has talked to lots of very successful people. And one of the things that I took away from it was all these people that he interviewed, CEOs and founders and like very, very high performers, they create this structure within their world so they can continually do the same things over and over and over and over again, right? They wake up early, they meditate, they eat well, they exercise, they have regimented times where they're working, they have very specific sleep hygiene. They do all of these things and they set up their world in a way because it's aimed at the goal of pursuing perfection, right? And so again, it's all those habits that get them there. So without that, I think, and I find it to be true in my own life. When I'm more regimented, when I'm doing the same things over and over and over again, like that's where I see success happen. That's where I see breakthrough happen. Whether I am trying to eat well, whether I am trying to do something for work, whether I am trying to, to improve something I'm doing with my kids or whatever. And guys, like, I'm just going to say, like, self-disclaimer, I fail massively all the time at that. My wife and I were talking about this recently, and she's like, you say this on the podcast. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Like you got me. I talk about these things that I want. I fail at them a lot. And so through all of this, I am learning, I have to have things in place, structures in place, so I can be successful. So, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did at the very end there. So I can be successful.
Yeah.
The quote I just read you: winning is not a sometime thing; it's an all the time thing.
Yeah.
Think about pursuing excellence in football. What's the ultimate goal?
Super Bowl.
Winning.
Yep.
Winning is the ultimate goal, right?
Yep.
Now, Vince Lombardi understood, though, and this is what's so brilliant about that quote. And when you tie it into his quote about excellence,
Yep.
he understood that if you want to win in football, there were other things in your life you had to master too. You couldn't just pursue excellency in football. You had to pursue excellency in other aspects, right? And you see this in athletes nowadays. You see it far more. This idea of, again, like what you said, the like what they eat and when they work out and when they sleep, even everything, right? To be excellent. Because what is the ultimate goal? We want to win.
Yep.
Right? Now, we're not football players, but we're men. What do we want to win at? What are we trying to win?
Well, I'd say we're trying to be the best, most masculine representation of ourselves that we can.
Okay.
Or the truest masculine representation of ourselves that we can.
Can you give me some examples? In what way? What faculties or in what facets? What do you mean?
Yeah. So I think, a couple of things that just come to mind are mastery of my own desires and passions.
Okay.
Not being governed by my emotions, but rather allowing my intellect and my passions to work in tandem to make good decisions, to react in ways that benefit the world around me. I think being the person that my family can count on all the time.
There we go. I like that.
Right? Like being the person that my family can come to, and they know that I will be a refuge. They know that I will help hold them up. They know that I will protect them. Which refuge and protection, same thing.
No, I get it.
But like those are the things I think about. And so when I think and how that practically looks, I mean, that practically looks like me having control of myself, that when my wife has a terrible day or my kids have a terrible day or my kids are acting out of control, I am not reacting in a way that's negative towards them, right? That is, I'm yelling and screaming at them and losing control of myself, but rather when I can interact with them, being that calm in the storm, that is what I think about.
I think it's interesting that you brought that up because, like, again, we've heard people say that toxic masculinity. Right?
Sure.
But I think we'd make the argument that is not masculine.
Yep.
Right? To just blow up at your kids, to scream and yell at your wife. Correct. Right? That's not masculine behavior. That's abusive behavior.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It's a lack of masculinity.
Yep.
Right? And so I think it's important that we bring that up because it does need to be discussed. Men need to understand that I think we do see a feminization of men in our culture where we're not pursuing excellence and masculinity, but we also see that over the top side that is switches from masculinity to something else as well.
Sure.
Right. And I think that needs to be addressed as well. And I mean, do you see it addressed a lot? I feel like it's addressed from one side, but only to push you to the feminization, not to actually put you back towards masculinity.
Again, I think we as a society, I don't think have a good understanding of what masculinity is.
Which is why we have this podcast.
Well, I think us and a lot of it's been interesting peeking around. Like there's a lot of other guys out there who are talking about some really good things. So guys, I would encourage you all to just check out others who are talking about similar things that we're talking about. Because part of, I think, this masculine journey is learning. I am astounded when I talk to people who don't want to learn, or think they have things figured out. Guys, I mean, the more we learn, the more we should realize we don't know a whole lot, right? The more your eyes are open, you should be able to go, oh, wow, there's so many things I'm deficient in. There's so many things that I can be better at. And so I would just encourage you guys to keep learning, keep pursuing knowledge, and keep and be better, right? Like to continue to improve yourself.
I think what you just said there, though, is a huge part of pursuing excellence, right? It's the recognition of even when you get to that point where, like Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
Did he just like stop trying to get better? No, it was a relentless pursuit to get better. Tom Brady,
Yeah,
these guys.
yeah.
And again, we use sports because we're men and we like sports. So I know all three of us do.
Sure.
And we play them. And so it makes a little more sense from that aspect. But like as a dad, I don't get to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm a good enough dad. I'm going to stop trying now.
You shouldn't be.
No, right?
You shouldn't be.
Well, I mean, that's my point is that's not where I want to be.
Right.
And I think it's important for us to remember that, you know, Vince Lombardi, when he gives us this quote, he's talking about football, but beyond that, we can take that and look at it and apply it to our own lives, right? Life itself. I want to win. I want to win the Super Bowl. I want to win at life. I want to win as a dad. I want to win as a husband. I want to win as a friend. I want to win as a teacher, but I need to pursue excellence in each aspect of my life. Otherwise you become unbalanced.
There's
right?
there's a athlete from Denver. He's also national. He's in the national spotlight as well. He's an analyst for Fox. But in listening to him talk, he said it a bunch, but he says in coaching, you are either coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. Right. And so it's this idea of there's either this intentional, you are pursuing this, or you're allowing something to happen. And I think in our own lives, right, if you talk about winning and losing, those are both habits, right? If you think about that, like, let's think about that in our own lives. If you are either pursuing something good, right, or you're allowing bad stuff to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's how I see that, because if you are not pursuing something good, you're not taking hold of your life. You're just allowing the world to influence you. You're allowing outside, if you're just sitting playing video games all day, right? Like, you're not pursuing, I would say you're not pursuing something that's great. Not because video games in themselves aren't fun or that you can't have a career doing that. Look, there are plenty of people who make careers designing video games.
Or playing them, reviewing them.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's not to take away from that. But I would say even those guys, right, there is an aspect, they're not just enjoying the game. They're not just taking that game in. They're analyzing it. They are trying to get better for the pursuit of whether it's mastery of the game so they can be the best, whether it's designing a better video game. I think that there's a different approach. And one is this intentional pursuit. This other is you're just allowing things to influence you.
I think there's a pretty big difference between like playing video games because it's your job or playing video games
Yes.
because you're not wanting to deal with anything else in your life.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
where that's the purpose of your
Yes.
life, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think that's what you were getting at there. So you hear these quotes from Vince Lombardi. We look at the results as a coach. We look at how history has judged him. Let's look at now. Did you see any? And we didn't get too much into him, personally as much, but just judging from what we looked at, those external things that we can judge, and even those words.
Sure.
And because we saw actions and words, and then results, right?
Yeah.
From those words and those actions. Let's look at our definition, right? Or our touchstone, right? Of masculinity,
Sure.
strength, wielded with control and service to God and in defense of the true, beautiful, and good. What aspects of that did you see him demonstrate? Would you say? I don't know if we went deep enough into his life to be able to judge that.
There's not, I mean, if you want to just look at successes, right? Yeah, it's hard to tell. I think in even quotes, it's interesting. I often wonder, obviously he had an impact on his players, right?
I was going to get some player quotes, by the way, and I completely forgot to print them out.
Yeah.
That was my bad.
I guess I hesitate in judging, like using him to say, oh, he's a great example of these things.
Okay.
Because we're lacking some detail. However, it's clear like he was successful, right? And it's very clear that he knew how to use his words to inspire his players, right? Which in and of itself shows like some, I would say, virtue on his part, right? He clearly had to demonstrate some of these things, because I'll tell you, when you're trying to lead a whole bunch of people, right? If you're not living these out, if you're not showing these things, they're not going to follow you. There are, to borrow a quote from someone, there are guys who, when they create energy when they come into the room, and there are guys who create energy when they leave the room, right? And
Yep.
so I think he is one of those guys that created energy when he came into the room.
Absolutely.
And so we're just looking at just these things. I think there's probably plenty of things he probably could have been better as a man at, right? But if we want to just look at these just simply from what can we learn from his success and from his attitude towards how to gain success or to achieve success, clearly it is a habitual process,
Yes.
right? There is no getting to the end without all of these, achieving this goal without all of the things that go into it. And then also having high standards, right? In sales, we call them BHAGs, right? Big, hairy, audacious goals, right?
Awesome.
And so it kind of falls under that same that same ideology. You have to have these large, almost unattainable things to go after,
Yeah.
because then you know that when you fall short, you're still going to achieve excellence.
Yeah.
So that's what I think, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think if we wanted to dive more into it, we could. That would probably be a multi-hour,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't think we have enough time to do that.
I mean, and the real goal of this was to look not so much just at him as a man, but to look at because I think a big aspect of masculinity is that leadership and inspiration aspect. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think he exemplified that. I love that you said habits.
Yep.
Because how do we get better at these different things when we're like these different masculine things? How do we get better at strength, mental, physical, and spiritual? It's habits.
Yep.
Habit of working out, the habit of mental strength, pushing yourself a little further than you think you can go, dealing with situations instead of running away from them, spiritual growth. Whether if you're actually dealing with virtue, right? If you're not a Christian, not religious, that's the virtue side of things. How do you get better at being honest? Well, you practice it, but you look at people who are honest and you emulate them.
Sure.
Right.
Well,
So these ideas of developing good habits in order to develop and eventually reach excellence in every aspect of your life, and you see him anytime you have a good coach. And my dad will tell you this, and I think he said this on when he came on, this idea that a good coach, man, it's not a 20-hour a week job. It's a 40, it's a 60-hour a week job, because you're watching film, you're paying attention to your kids, you're checking them, you have specific ways that you are practicing and the specific things you're going for. It's almost like creating a prescription for each individual kid. And you're trying to bring out their strengths and help them cultivate those while also help them work on their weaknesses and be aware of them.
Sure.
And it's a job, man. Being a coach is a job. And then to put everything on these other players and they are the ones who are going out there doing it. You're not.
Yeah.
Like, that is pressure, man.
Yeah.
That is pressure. And so to see a guy who did that at such a high level that they named the freaking trophy after him, right?
Sure.
That everyone knows this guy's name who watches football. I think to me that does tell me a lot about him as a man. And that, like you said, that success, that leadership. And again, those quotes, they're like, some would say they're just words, but you saw them acted out, not just by his players, but by him. Because like you said, you're not going to follow somebody who tells you what to do and then goes off and does something different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing, I think we haven't really talked about it, but you brought up leadership and this, this idea of, a good leader pursues this excellence, right, in his own life. A good leader also has knows or has this idea of how to create excellence in others' lives.
Oh, yes.
They
bring
have
excellence out.
Yeah. And they have this goal. And so for him, right, he's looking at all of his players going, okay, in order for us to win the Super Bowl, right? Because ideally you don't start with like, okay, well, our goal is to win a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
No. Our goal, if you are a champion, if you are truly excellent, you are always trying to achieve the most unattainable thing that you can, or you're always pursuing that. And so what do you have to do? You have to help establish that vision in those around you.
Yes.
Right. And that's what a good leader does, is they get that buy-in. And so I think for us as men, like true men, we have to do that for those who are in our sphere of influence, right? Whether that's a friend, whether that is our family, our kids, if you're a leader at work, your employees, or those who you're tasked with training, all those things is looking at others and going, I see what you can be. How can I bring that out in you?
Yep.
And I'm going to put things in place, because that's the other piece that I think we forget is this, like, you know, we want to be good. We want to be great. So, okay, I want to be great at guitar. I'm going to go and I'm going to practice guitar for 6 hours every day. That sounds awesome, right? Like, oh, okay, of course you're going to be successful. No, right? Because there are so many other things in your environment that, and this is kind of comes out of Atomic Habits, which if you guys haven't read that, it's a fantastic book. And it's all about creating habits. There is so much in the environment that you have to change in order to be successful, in order to pursue those habits, right? So if you think about the guitar example, okay, I want to be a great guitar player. Well, what do I need to do? I need to practice guitar. Okay, but I also need to find somebody to teach me guitar. I also need to find, you know, a place that I can practice without distraction. I also, you know, like there's all these other pieces. I need to have a progression of what I'm going to practice so that I become progressively more advanced, right? It's not just going and doing this one thing or these two things. There is a system that you have to build around yourself, around your family or your friends, or all these things in order so that they can be successful too.
So I love the fact that you brought up, and that was actually going to be my ending point, was just this question of, so what practical application can we take from this man's life and just these quotes and what we discussed tonight and put it into action in our own lives? And I thought you brought it up there, that idea of a real man doesn't break the people around him down. He builds them up. He does his best to bring out, because that's what the men are supposed to be, leaders of their family. Okay. Biblically, if you're not biblical, okay, that's fine. But I mean, if you look at all of history, men were called to be leaders.
Sure.
And even in these cultures that don't even interact with each other, we see that expectation and that idea that men were charged with that. And so when you're with your family, okay, how are you helping your sons bring out how are you helping them bring out their best? How are you helping bring out the best in your wife? Are you breaking her down? Are you building her up? Are you helping around the house because you're a part of the family and it's your duty as a leader? Or are you helping around because you're helping?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really cool that you brought that up, that idea of bringing out the best in others.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something you can really learn from a guy like Vince Lombardi. He brought out the best in his players.
No, and I, you know, I think I do want to make a point here. And this has just been kind of a growth thing for me. Something I've kind of come to probably within the last 6 months, probably since doing this podcast. But being the leader doesn't necessarily mean you're making the decisions.
Yeah. Or that even you're the best.
Or that you're right. So being the leader means that you are putting others in places to succeed. Right. That's what that means. And so I think that so many people, and I think one of the big gripes or complaints, or, you know, that women would kind of bring against a lot of, you know, I'd say post-industrial masculinity, is that there's this idea of, well, guys are the leader, well, we're in charge. That's not necessarily what that means, right? Like that's I would say that means that we are responsible to bring out the best in those around us. Now, sometimes that means we make the decision, right? But sometimes that means we help others arrive at the decision, or we help them make the decision, right? Well,
and a good leader listens.
Yes.
A good leader doesn't, I mean,
and it's,
you know, you brought up husbands, and it's like, I'm sorry, a good husband does not ignore his wife's counsel.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Well, like that's ridiculous.
there's also, I don't want to get, it's not a dictatorship either.
Yes.
Right. Like that's something that people think with like leadership. Okay, well, you have the power. You're the dictator. No, that's not what a leader does. There are so many people who lead without a title, right? Like the person who is at your job, who is the example, who is like doing the best and is doing all the right things. That's leading without going around, hey, you need to do this. Hey, you need to do this.
That's a boss. I don't know if I would call
agree.
that a leader.
Agreed.
Yeah, I like differentiating between those two.
I want to make that point because I think a lot of people will be like, well, men are the leaders, so they make the decisions.
Well, I think there's a lot of men who feel that way, right? That,
Yeah.
and I think it was, I mean, even if you go back to times where men were expected to lead the family, and
Sure.
it was like the full on it, like you said, you know, it becomes an aspect of domination rather
Yes.
than an aspect of leadership, and I
And
think
that's
that's a
not
lack of leadership. And I think of how I was put in the position to be the 7th grade team lead, and the person who was before me, she did everything. She was an incredible 7th grade team lead. She steps away, and I step in, and I'm like, there's no way I can do all this.
Yeah.
However, we have a full 7th grade team full of people who have all these incredible talents.
Yep.
And so I all of a sudden started getting volunteers.
Yep.
And people were stepping up in ways that met their strengths. And all of a sudden, our 7th grade team really became
Yep.
a team. And it wasn't that the other 7th grade lead didn't do a great job, by the way. She was incredible. She took it all on herself.
Sure.
But and that's how she led. She led by example, and she did everything herself, you know, and she would ask for help if she needed. But, you know, for me, it was more like, I'm not gonna be able to do all that. So I looked to the people who had strengths, and I was like, let's use that strength. And it also, I mean, I feel like it benefits each of us.
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden it's not about me, it's about us as a team. And I
Yeah.
think that's really important. I love that you brought, because again, you know, this idea of practical application for us as men, for you guys watching, you know, where are you lacking in excellence in your life? Are you pursuing it in every aspect of your life, or only in a few? Are you only pursuing it on the job but not at home? Are you pursuing excellence in your relationships with others?
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
the young men out there. Okay, are you pursuing excellence in how you treat women? Are you pursuing excellence in how you're acting in class? Whatever it is, you know, that's what I always ask my boys: is where are you pursuing excellence? Are you only in one aspect? Because sorry, man, you're going to start losing.
Yep.
And you see it in sports.
Yep.
I think it's what's so interesting. You see guys who lack character.
Yep.
And they fail over. I mean, there's some successes in there, but I think you see significantly more success when you see that balance.
Yeah.
Mike, any final thoughts from you?
No,
Dude, you did so much talking tonight. It was
I'm
amazing.
on it.
Tim, any final thoughts?
I think just when you talk about pursuing, guys, that means what habits are you doing?
Yep.
What habits have you made for yourself so that you can get to where you need to be? I think that oftentimes when we think about pursuit, a lot of it happens in our mind. Oh,
Mhm.
I have the right thoughts. I think
thought
I'm
about working out
Yeah,
today.
exactly. What habits are you actually doing?
Yep.
Like that's what that means. And so whether that is, you know, when you find yourself in a tense situation and you typically blow up,
Controlling yourself.
controlling yourself, right?
Yep.
Like practicing that. Are you doing breathing exercises? Are you doing things to help control that emotion to keep it from destroying those around you? So
Mhm.
again, my challenge for all the guys here, including myself, is, you know, what habits are you putting in your life, putting together so that you can be excellent? Because you guys,
Excellent men.
we need excellent men, right? Like how do you what are you doing? And if you're not doing something, do it. Go out and find something that will help you achieve your goals. Because if you're just sitting there and hoping that things are going to happen and expecting that you're going to get a lucky break, it's funny how the luckiest people are also the hardest working people.
Yeah.
Right? It's weird to me how the people who are most successful tend to be some of the hardest working
Mhm.
people. So those are my thoughts on that.
I love that, man. I love that. Again, that idea of pursuing excellence as a man, excellent masculinity, meaning like, you know, where can I get stronger mentally, physically, and spiritually? Where can I increase my pursuit and defense of the true, the beautiful, and good? I need to know what those are first. So what can I learn about them?
Yeah.
Being, the truth, what is beautiful and what is good. And you know, like that's where my mind goes. And I immediately go to that practical application of I always start with my family. Because my job kind of like, we as men, we love our jobs, right? We tend to want to do well in those. But you know, coming home after a day of work and being tired and saying, no, I'm going to take that step and I'm going to go throw the football with my son.
Yep.
That's a simple step. This weekend, taking him to a football game, you know, going paintball with him after going to Bible study, and then going to birthday parties with family and interacting with family. You know, maybe it's getting off your phone and interacting with the people around you, you know?
Absolutely.
But just what little things you can do to be excellent. And I want to end with this. I have one last quote. And this is my favorite quote of all time. This was the first Vince Lombardi quote I ever heard. And I heard it and I just thought it was the most inspirational thing to me I'd ever heard. And I've held on to this one for forever since I heard it. So I'll share it with you guys, kind of end things here. I firmly believe that any man's finest hour, the greatest fulfillment of all that he holds dear, is that moment when he has worked out his heart in a good cause and lies exhausted on the field of battle, victorious. Like what a scene, man. Like you could just, and he's talking about football, but at the same time, that's also a life statement, right? Like the men who are, you can just see a man who has fought this battle, right? Sword and shield, he's bloodied. The battle comes to an end. He's just like on his knees, exhausted, but he's put his heart out in a good cause. But maybe it's not battle. Maybe it's my family. Maybe it's that week that I am exhausted, but I get to the end of the week and I'm like, I did everything I was supposed to do. I coached my son's football team and, I was exhausted, but we didn't even win the game. But the kids had a blast. They loved it. They learned a ton. That was awesome. I went home. I helped my wife with some stuff. I went around and I did stuff around the house. I cleaned and I vacuumed because I knew it needed to be done, not because I wanted to help my wife, but because I'm part of the family.
Yeah.
And then I get to bed and I lay down. I'm like, man, I'm tired. Man, do you feel good? Right? Like those are the days I feel the best, when I serve others and I put my heart out in a good cause and I lay down at night exhausted and I think, man, that was worth my time. There are days where I feel bad though. Most of the time that's because I spent my day doing nothing, goofing off, playing my video games and doing nothing else. That's not to say there's not a place for hobbies, but this idea of put your heart out in a good cause, guys, because when you lay down at night and you're exhausted, it's going to be a good exhaustion and you sleep well. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Hope you enjoyed hanging out with us on Beyond the Beard. And another great talk. If you guys have anything else to add, please feel free to add something in the comments. And we'll see you in the next episode of Beyond the Beard.
Thanks, guys. Journey well.
When this silent, you'll be alone, far from friends in life. You'll spend your evenings getting stoned